Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan. The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. After a court holiday, we are getting you ready for another full day of testimony after several new developments in the case on Friday. We expect testimony to pick back up this morning with the third interview Michelle Troconis gave investigators back in 2019. The lead detective in the case who was in that interview room, John Kimball, will be back on the stand today. We'll dig into this lengthy interview and talk about some of the takeaways coming up. Detective Kimball also walked the jury through surveillance video from May 24, 2019, the day Jennifer Dulos disappeared. It showed multiple trips that afternoon to and from 80 Mountain Spring Road, a property Dulos had for sale, and 4 Jefferson Crossing, the home he and Troconis lived in. We saw both the Jeep Cherokee and the Chevy Suburban in those videos. Both vehicles Troconis eventually admitted to driving that day. Some evidence that we hadn't seen before or heard about until Friday also came up in court. Video of smoke coming from the left chimney of the Jefferson Crossing home that same afternoon on May 24th. Prosecutors allege the times the smoke is seen coming from the chimney line up with trips Troconis made to the home. Her attorney told reporters fires in that fireplace were a regular occurrence. And the defendant is no longer allowed to use her laptop in the courtroom. This after the state claims Troconis had part of a sealed custody evaluation report up on her screen in the view of the court gallery and pool camera. A judge called for a contempt hearing, and he said that'll happen after the defense rests at the earliest. Let's bring in NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geist once again live for us outside Stamford Superior Court. Kevin, let's start with that third interview Michelle Troconis gave to police. We know that it is more than 3 hours long. So what has the jury learned so far in this interview from what they've seen?
Shannon, good morning. Well, this third interview was done a few months after the first 2 interviews, and this is the interview that police investigators allege Troconis changed the most details in her story or added some new details that they had not heard in prior interviews. Some of those inconsistencies include no interaction with Fotis Dulos the morning Jennifer disappeared, and Fotis Dulos' cell phone being in his office all morning, and the fact she answered a call on Fotis' cell phone with Kent Mawhinney present. For the afternoon on May 24th, she also notes in the interview a joke she said Fotis or Pavel Gumieni made about when Pavel arrived to 80 Mountain Spring and saw Troconis and Dulos standing up against the Tacoma. She told investigators one of the men said, quote, "I didn't see anything or we weren't doing anything." According to her arrest warrant, investigators say Troconis appeared to say Gumieni's arrival interrupted her and Dulos from engaging in sex alongside the passenger side of the Tacoma. She also spoke about the presence of a bicycle in the garage of the property and the presence of Pavel Gumieni's Toyota Tacoma. This third interview is the first time investigators are hearing about those details from Troconis. Right from the start of the interview, investigators pressed Troconis that they do not believe she's being truthful with them and that they have information to prove it, and tell her this is her chance to clear things up.
The way it looks now is you may be looking like you're more involved than you actually are. So we're trying to give you an opportunity to kind of explain what's going on and put things in perspective and context.
Now, we have a little under an hour left in this third interview before the defense, of course, has their chance to cross-examine John Kimball about this interview, as well as some of the surveillance videos that led into the interview. Shannon.
All right, Kevin, let's dig into some of those, what investigators called inconsistencies in Michelle Troconis' story over the course of those 3 interviews. The first point being that investigators have highlighted multiple times is that Michelle Troconis first said she saw Fotis Dulos the morning of May 24th at 4 Jefferson Crossing, but later admitted in that third interview that she did not.
When you turned your alarm off in your bedroom, was Fotis there? He was not there. You did not take a shower with him. That was a lie. Or a mistake. Or a mistake. Okay. But now you realize that he wasn't there. Do you have that?
I think so. We're going to stop.
So prosecutors asked Kimball to take the jury through those inconsistencies, including that Troconis said she saw Fotis in his office that morning as well. And for the first time, we heard her tell police about answering that alleged alibi call from Doulos' friend Andreas Tutsiaides. Investigators say Fotis texted Andreas the night before Jennifer disappeared, instructing him to call the next morning at 8:30 a.m. Doulos' cell phone records show Andreas called at 8:26 a.m. and that the phone remained in Farmington. Michelle told investigators alleged co-conspirator Ken Mawhinney told her to pick it up when the phone rang in the office at Jefferson Crossing.
The phone rang, and it was a call from it said Andreas. And Ken stood up, and I think he was kind of, for what I imagine, coming towards this side of the room. Like, if you're gonna pick up the phone or something like that, I picked up. I didn't know what
He said that too.
He said, "Are you like there's a phone ringing, or you're gonna pick something with the phone, or the call, not the phone, the call?" And I picked up the phone.
Now, Kevin, this testimony about Troconis not remembering certain aspects of what happened or omitting certain things here. At the end of the day, we got a hint of how the defense plans to address those inconsistencies, right?
Right. The state is close to resting their case, and the defense will have their chance to bring up exactly how they plan to defend Troconis. Now, John Schoenhorn intends to bring in two experts we learned during the trial on Friday, both professors, both experts in memory loss, one regarding sort of language barriers and memory loss, and the other sort of stress and trauma in regards to memory loss. So we understand from the defense that they plan to bring in experts to sort of talk about how Troconis might have come up with some of these inconsistencies, why she might have some of these blocks in memory sort of deleted from her brain, why she can remember certain details and why she can't. Now, the defense did have to present, those professors had to present quick reports to the judge and to the state if they were going to testify this week. So we should learn first thing this morning if they were able to present those reports to the judge and state prosecutors in time. But they are expected to testify if they were able to submit those reports.
Something else, Kevin, the prosecution pointed out for the jury. Kimball testified that Troconis never mentioned Pavel Gumiany's Toyota Tacoma was at 80 Mountain Spring Road that day. She also gave a reason for why she and Fotis Doulos may have seemed surprised when the four-group employees showed up there.
Pavel arrives, Fotis and I, we were like against the car.
Which car?
The Tacoma.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Fotis was like behind me, like physical contact. Pavel arrives. I think Fotis or Pavel says I didn't see anything, or we weren't doing anything. I think something like a joke.
Maybe physically that you two were.
Like, yeah, we're meeting.
Yep.
So for the first time, we're hearing Troconis say there was some sort of a joke made by either Pavel or Fotis that he may have looked surprised when he got to 80 Mountain Spring Road because he may have interrupted some sort of physical contact between Troconis and Doulos. It was not something that came up during his testimony, Pavel's testimony, that is. Kevin, before Kimball testified about the interview, we heard and saw more about the timeline of events the afternoon of May 24th, and we got a brand new look at the Toyota Tacoma arriving at the 80 Mountain Spring Road property at 12:22 p.m. Now, police allege Fotis Doulos was driving the truck that belonged to Gumiany, and through surveillance video they claim shows the Tacoma traveling to New Canaan and back to 80 Mountain Spring Road. All right, more than an hour later, some more surveillance video, this time taken from a home on Eli Road, which is near Fotis Doulos' Jefferson Crossing home. First, at 1:32 p.m., a white Jeep Cherokee is seen heading in the direction of 80 Mountain Spring Road. Michelle Troconis told investigators she drove the Cherokee on May 24th. And then just a minute later, you see a Chevy Suburban consistent with the one Fotis Doulos owned heading the same way. few minutes later, a camera across from 80 Mountain Spring first shows the Cherokee pulling in the driveway and then the Suburban less than a minute later. So, Kevin, let's talk about that over an hour time gap between when the Tacoma arrives at 80 Mountain Spring Road and then those other two vehicles get there as well. If Fotis was driving the Tacoma, did we have any idea how he ended up back at Jefferson Crossing to pick up the Suburban and then drive back to 80 Mountain Spring Road?
We don't know exactly how Fotis would have ended up back at 4 Jefferson Crossing. The only reason we know he was back at 4 Jefferson Crossing is because of Michelle Troconis' interviews. Now, she said in those interviews that Fotis came home sometime around that 1 o'clock time frame and called up to her from inside the house. She was upstairs in her daughter's room saying, let's have lunch. So we know that Fotis Dulos arrives back at that 4 Jefferson Crossing home, and then we later see the white Jeep Cherokee as well as the Chevy Suburban arrive at that 80 Mountain Spring property. But this is sort of a large window of time, that early afternoon time frame, where there are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers about the movements of some of those vehicles, as well as the movements of Michelle Troconis and Fotis Dulos.
And Kevin, there was a piece of evidence investigators were looking at that we haven't heard about until now. Kimball also testified about surveillance video showing 4 Jefferson Crossing from the home across the street. You may remember the homeowner at 1 Jefferson Crossing testified about giving this video to investigators. Investigators noticed something in that video that they thought was worth evidentiary value. Smoke rising from the chimney at the far left of the home. We have highlighted that smoke so you can get a better look here. And a reminder, the jury sees the video in an unedited form. Investigators noticed something else about when that smoke started rising.
Detective Kimball, just while that video is playing, would this have been before or after that vehicle consistent with a white Jeep Cherokee was observed heading back in the general direction of 4 Jefferson Crossing?
This video is after the white Jeep Cherokee was seen heading towards 4 Jefferson.
At 3:25 p.m., Kimball pointed out in the video more smoke was coming from the chimney of 4 Jefferson Crossing. Now, between each video clip and testimony about the smoke, prosecutors asked John Kimball to walk through that neighborhood surveillance video and line the smoke up with when the Cherokee and later the Suburban arrived at the home. The jury watched as multiple times surveillance video showing the white Jeep Cherokee leave the driveway of 80 Mountain Spring and then head into the direction of 4 Jefferson Crossing. And then video on Eli Road near Jefferson Crossing showed the Jeep heading back toward the Mountain Spring property. At one point, the jury sees a Suburban leave 80 Mountain Spring shortly after 4 p.m. They see it go past the Eli Road camera toward Jefferson Crossing. Then it heads back to 80 Mountain Spring Road. Kimball tells the jury in her third interview, Michelle Troconis told investigators she took the Chevy Suburban at some point that day. Pavel Gumini testified that during the shuffling back and forth of those vehicles around 5 p.m., that Michelle was in the Cherokee first and then the Suburban.
There now appears to be smoke coming out of the east chimney before Jefferson Crossing at 6:42 p.m.
Incidentally, during your first 2 interviews with the defendant, did she ever indicate to you whether or not anyone had lit in a fire at 4 Jefferson Crossing on May 24th?
She did not know.
Now, the smoke continues on the surveillance video through the next image captured at 7:02 p.m. In his testimony, Kimball said it was 3 separate smoke events separated by non-smoke. So, Kevin, let's talk more about the smoke and tying it back to the trips back and forth between the 2 properties. What's the implication here?
Right, it's fascinating evidence because we haven't seen the surveillance video before and the smoke was never mentioned in any of the arrest warrants. So it is an interesting piece, but it will be a bit of a jump for the jury to sort of determine exactly what that smoke means, why there was smoke coming out of the house. Of course, you're in late May, and prosecutors also attempted to point out at one point that there was a young man entering that 1 Jefferson Crossing home wearing shorts and a T-shirt, but the jury will have to sort of make that leap for themselves because they couldn't really get into too much testimony beyond that. And of course, defense attorney John Schoenhorn outside court making the point that anything regarding the smoke for the jury and for prosecutors is pure speculation.
Well, Kevin, the prosecution did try to highlight it was late May, warm weather, people wearing T-shirts and shorts, but the defense objected to its relevance and the judge sustained that. Still, the jury is going to draw its own conclusions. And her attorney, John Schoenhorn, says having fires in the fireplace was a routine thing year-round for Michelle Troconis.
There would be testimony if we have a defense case that is something that she did regularly. And in fact, apparently, and again, I don't have personal knowledge of this, in South American culture, apparently having fires in your fireplace is a social activity and something that one does on a regular basis, but I can't personally attest to that fact. I've only been to Chile, I've never been to Argentina or Venezuela, so.
Now, another big moment, the judge deciding what to do about allegations of a sealed custody evaluation report between Jennifer and Fotis Dulos, ending up displayed on Michelle Troconis' laptop. Well, this happened on Thursday. We have blurred the laptop screen because prosecutors again say it is under court order sealed and it has been barred from coming into the trial. On Friday, the judge said he won't hold a contempt hearing until after the defense rests at the very earliest, but he did ban anyone besides counsel from having a laptop inside the courtroom.
It is amazing that nearly 5 years after Jennifer Dulos' death, that this defendant still will not let her rest in peace.
We have taken steps to avoid and ignore any negative interaction and to try to focus on the evidence in this case.
Now, the state also sought to have the defendant's mother removed from the courtroom, claiming she signaled for Michelle Troconis to take down that report from her laptop and had previously mouthed words to the jury. Now, the judge didn't directly address that, but said anyone who tries to communicate with the jury or a witness will be removed.
Well, the court is not going to countenance or competing pep rallies like you have in high school. The defendant supporters and the state supporters. This is not high school. The court is not going to become a hallway monitor.
So the judge cracking down as we get ready to enter day 24. NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geis heading up to the courtroom now for more testimony. Kevin, we'll let you get back up to the courtroom. We'll check back in with you tomorrow. Much more analysis ahead of Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Coming up, we will talk with attorney Jim Bergen about Friday's developments, including what impact a contempt hearing could have on the trial. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are joined once again by attorney Jim Bergen, one of our legal analysts throughout the trial. Jim, glad to have you back once again. We're now expecting a contempt hearing for Michelle Troconis after one of Jennifer's friends brought it to the state's attention that they had seen a page of that sealed evaluation report on Michelle Troconis' laptop. She's had it there out on her table throughout the trial. The judge had ruled that the contents of this document would be banned in this trial. It would not be coming out. How common is it that halfway through a trial that a defendant is now facing this issue of contempt?
Well, contempt is actually common. We've seen it in all the Trump trials. But judges have to control their courtroom so we can do justice. We have to be very strict. So this judge is doing a very good job trying to keep this in line. On the other hand, whatever's going on there, which is not appropriate, should not in any way affect the more important thing, which is a murder trial going on here and the destruction of evidence trial going on. So the judge is doing his best to kind of just get rid of it. And someday we have to figure out what was going on. There should be consequences if somebody's violating court orders. But right now, we're trying to run a trial. So this judge does seem to have his focus. And Attorney John Schoenhorn addressed reporters outside the court on Friday about the issue of the report. He felt that it was concerning that Jennifer's friend in the gallery knew what the report looked like. She's the one that recognized it. Since it is sealed, that was his concern. He also cited past media coverage about Fotis Dulos allegedly taking a copy of that report and it ending up in his criminal defense attorney's hands. That's Norm Pattis's hands.
These issues with this report and who has them and how far back that goes does go back to at least 2019, as far as I know.
Which does
so,
Michelle have it?
To my knowledge, she does not have that report. She did not get it from me. Let's put it that way. So.
Yeah. So what do you think about Attorney Schoenhorn's answer there and how he's handling that issue? His other co-attorney here was quick to say, you know, we it didn't come from us.
Right, and it's interesting because lawyers have very strict rules. They cannot communicate anything relating to a case without the permission of the client. Now, the client is clearly given permission because she knows he's doing it every day, but I don't think she was contemplating this. So I think he handled it as well as he could. His credibility is also on the line, so he had to support his own credibility. And the way he gave that answer, I don't think it did any harm to her. But whatever was going on is a complete sideshow from the trial itself. So thankfully, the judge said, we won't be dealing with this until the defense rests. It wouldn't surprise me if he later says, we're not dealing with this until this trial's over.
The other issue, Michelle's case, is her mom was reprimanded by the judge for allegedly mouthing to the jurors. This is something that the state brought to the judge's attention. It doesn't matter at all when the jury is out of the room when these sort of situations arise. The judge referred to it again as competing pep rallies between the defense and the state, alleging that, the Farber-Dulos camp signaled support to certain witnesses, blowing kisses or giving hearts. The state said that they had addressed that as well. But does that impact the jury at all?
Well, you're right to say, let's separate what goes on in front of the jury from what goes on. Both are important. The judge needs to keep a courtroom pretty serious. It's very strict. This happens just about every single day in criminal courts. There are, people cheering for one side or the other, and it is the judge's job to make sure none of that goes on, and they throw people out fairly routinely. For a mother to be involved, yes, that happens. Mothers are mothers of victims, mothers of defendants. But the judge's job is to do exactly what he's done here, and I thought he did it with just the right amount of humor, but to let everybody know, he's not going to tolerate any of it.
Let's talk about this third and final interview. At least to our knowledge, that Michelle Troconis gave to investigators were close to the end of the prosecution's case and at the beginning of the defense's case. You've talked about how unique it is for this jury to hear from the defendant in her own words, without testifying. So considering the alleged inconsistencies that the prosecution has been highlighting, do you think Troconis taking the stand to clear up what the investigators called inconsistencies in her story would help the defense?
Well, that's very dangerous to put her on the stand because the prosecution then gets to cover their whole case in cross-examination of her. Instead, I think you have to count on the fact that however she conducted herself is something appealing enough to a jury that you don't get in there and try with her on the stand to straighten out the inconsistencies. Who's to say she's going to even be able to straighten them out? And the real problem is it takes you off track. The real case here is what was going in her mind at that time, which is completely different from what's going on in the police's mind. Fotis Doulos had, the entire time he knew her, spent his whole time trying to prove himself to be a certain kind of way. Nobody else ever suspected he was going to kill somebody. How would she suspect he's going to kill somebody when he's presenting himself as the exact opposite? I'm a family guy. I need a family woman.
All right, our analysis with Jim Bergen continues right after this. You're watching Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back now with attorney Jim Bergen, one of our legal analysts throughout the Michelle Troconis trial. A lot happened on Friday. We're breaking it all down. There's this new evidence that's just been presented for the very first time. The smoke seen from the Jefferson Crossing home the day of Jennifer Doulos' disappearance. According to investigators, it happened regularly when they say the Jeep that Michelle Troconis admitted to driving was seen on surveillance video returning to the home. What, Jim, do you make of all of this? And is it compelling for the jury, or is it just too circumstantial to really prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt here?
Well, it's compelling like any murder mystery. You always want to see every clue. And, of course, as soon as you see the smoke coming around the same time there was this murder and nobody knows the body, every single person thinks, oh, my God, they're burning the body. There's no evidence of this at all. Yet, here it is in the courtroom. So the real challenge for a defense lawyer is to keep your eye on the prize. What is going on in this case? His client's knowledge. And so if he keeps his eye on the prize, he uses this as an opportunity to pivot. Let the jury know, look, that's being put in front of you to take you off your job. Your job, what was going on in her head, not what's going on in the head of the law enforcement people. They did their job extremely well, but they suspected him from the beginning. She was the exact opposite side of the spectrum. She only knew him to be who he presents to her. How else is she supposed to know him? Start imagining like a cop? No, she's like, this is somebody who I'm going to watch his 5 kids. I love my daughter. I love my parents. And that's how he's a super salesman. Remember, he manipulated that babysitter and revealed himself to turn on a dime. He is a very dangerous, clever guy.
Going to be really interesting to see how Attorney John Schoenhorn approaches this cross-examination with Detective Kimball. Jim, thank you so much as always. We'll see you back next time. That concludes our exclusive Inside the Trial Michelle Troconis streaming special. We will see you back here tomorrow.